My brother Marcus and I grew up in the same middle-class household in suburban Chicago. Our parents owned a modest accounting firm. Nothing fancy but stable. Marcus was 5 years older, the golden child who could do no wrong. Straight A's, varsity basketball, full scholarship to Northwestern's business school. I was the accident. The surprise baby who disrupted their plans. Mom was 43 when she had me. By the time I was 10, she'd remind me at least once a week. You weren't planned, Emma. But we made it work. Marcus graduated when I was 13. Got his MBA at 25. Married Jennifer, a corporate lawyer whose family had money, real money. The kind that came with a hyphenated last name and a vacation home in Aspen. At 23, Marcus launched Chin Development Group with Jennifer's family's connections. Commercial real estate. Strip malls, office complexes, mixed-use developments. He was good at it. Confident. Knew how to work a room, how to make investors feel like they were backing the next big thing. I went to community college. Studied business management while working full-time at a property management company. It wasn't glamorous. I answered phones, filed paperwork, learned the unglamorous side of real estate. Maintenance requests, tenant disputes, late-night emergencies. Marcus would bring Jennifer to family dinners and talk about his latest deals. We just secured financing for a $12 million project in Naperville, he'd announce, swirling wine in his glass. 6 retail spaces, 4 restaurant pads, structured parking. Dad would beam. That's my boy. I'd mention I got promoted to assistant property manager. That's nice, honey, Mom would say, already turning back to Marcus. Tell us more about the Naperville project. At 25, I started investing. Small amounts at first, $5,000 here, $10,000 there. Apartment buildings that needed work. Commercial spaces in transitional neighborhoods. I wasn't chasing glamour. I was chasing cash flow and long-term appreciation. I learned to read markets, to spot potential before it became obvious. While Marcus chased flagship projects with razor-thin margins, I built a portfolio of unglamorous assets that printed money every month. By 30, I had $2.3 million in real estate equity. I formed an LLC, Meridian Capital Holdings, and started operating through it. Privacy wasn't about hiding. It was about building without interference. Marcus knew I worked in property management. He didn't know I'd moved from assistant manager to acquisitions director at a regional investment firm. He definitely didn't know that Meridian Capital Holdings was mine, or that by 33 my portfolio was worth $18 million. At family gatherings he'd make jokes. Still collecting rent checks, Emma? He'd laugh, and Jennifer would smile, that tight, polite smile that said she agreed but was too well-bred to say it out loud. Something like that, I'd reply. The truth was simpler than he imagined and more complex than he'd believe. I'd built wealth by doing the opposite of everything he did. He chased prestige projects. I bought cash-flowing assets. He leveraged to the hilt. I maintained conservative debt ratios. He needed investors to feel important. I needed assets to perform. By 35, Meridian Capital Holdings managed $47 million in commercial and residential real estate across 6 states. I lived in a nice but not ostentatious condo. Drove a 3-year-old Acura. Wore clothes from Nordstrom Rack. Marcus lived in a $2.1 million house in Hinsdale, drove a Tesla and a Range Rover, wore Tom Ford suits. His Instagram was a highlight reel of success. Groundbreaking ceremonies, ribbon cuttings, charity galas. My Instagram was private and had 43 followers. The irony that would later destroy him. Meridian Capital Holdings had been an investor in Chin Development Group for 7 years. It started almost by accident. In 2018, Marcus's firm was raising capital for a mixed-use development in Schaumburg. Good location, solid fundamentals, but they were $3 million short on their capital stack. Their lead investor had pulled out after environmental surveys revealed contamination issues. I read about it in a commercial real estate newsletter. Did my own due diligence. The contamination was manageable. $400,000 to remediate, already budgeted into the project. The fundamentals were actually excellent. The lead investor had just gotten cold feet. I called their investor relations contact. I represent a private capital group interested in the Schaumburg project. We'd like to discuss a $3.2 million equity position. They were desperate. The deal closed in 3 weeks. I structured it through Meridian Capital Holdings with standard confidentiality provisions. Marcus never knew his little sister, the one still collecting rent checks, had just saved his flagship project. The development performed exactly as projected. Meridian earned a 23% IRR over 4 years. Marcus took full credit. That Schaumburg project really put us on the map, he'd say at family dinners. We turned it around after our initial investor got scared. I'd nod. That's great, Marcus. We invested in 2 more Chin development projects over the next 3 years. An office complex in Aurora. A retail center in Joliet. Same structure. Confidential equity positions through Meridian Capital Holdings, standard institutional terms. Total capital deployed, $5.4 million. Marcus's firm grew on the strength of these successful projects. By 2023, Chin Development Group was managing $140 million in assets. Marcus was speaking at industry conferences, getting profiled in Crane's Chicago business. At a family Christmas party in 2022, he cornered me in the kitchen. You know, Emma, if you ever want to get serious about real estate, I could maybe get you an entry-level position. Receptionist or something. Jennifer's assistant just quit. I was literally his largest investor. I appreciate the offer, I said. I'm good where I am. He shook his head. You're 36, Emma. Still renting an apartment, still working a management job. When are you going to build something real? I looked at him. Really looked at him. Marcus believed his own story so completely that reality couldn't penetrate. In his mind, he was the successful entrepreneur and I was the struggling younger sister who needed his charity. Maybe someday, I said. What I didn't say. Meridian Capital Holdings had just closed on a $23 million apartment complex acquisition in Indianapolis. My personal net worth had crossed $31 million. I was building something real. I just wasn't building it for his approval. The lawsuit came out of nowhere. In March 2024, I received a certified letter at my condo. Marcus and Jennifer were suing me for $450,000. The claim: I had borrowed money from Dad before he died in 2019 and never repaid it. It was completely fabricated. Dad had given me $25,000 when I was 28. A gift, not a loan, documented in a notarized letter he'd insisted on writing. So your brother can never say I played favorites, he'd explained. I called Marcus. What is this lawsuit? It's pretty simple, Emma. Dad lent you $450,000 over the years. We have records. You need to pay the estate back. Dad gave me $25,000 as a gift. One time. In 2017. I have documentation. That's not what Mom remembers. Mom had moderate dementia. She remembered 30 years ago perfectly but couldn't tell you what she'd eaten for breakfast. You're using Mom's confusion to fabricate a debt that never existed. See you in court, Emma. He hung up. I hired an attorney. Thomas Wu, a litigator who'd handled complex estate disputes. We had the documentation. Dad's notarized gift letter, bank records showing the single $25,000 transfer, nothing else. This should be straightforward, Thomas said. They have no evidence because it didn't happen. But Marcus had something more valuable than evidence. He had a narrative. The narrative was simple. Marcus was successful, credible, a known quantity in Chicago's business community. I was mysterious, private, working a low-level job while somehow living comfortably. Where was my money coming from? It must have been Dad's money. At the first hearing, Marcus's attorney painted me as financially irresponsible. Miss Chin has no documented income sufficient to support her lifestyle. She claims to work in property management, but lives in a luxury condo and drives a new car. The only logical explanation is that she received substantial funds from the deceased. Thomas objected. My client's income is not at issue here. The plaintiff has provided zero documentation of any loan. The judge, an older man named Reeves who clearly related more to Marcus than to me, seemed skeptical of my side. Miss Chin, you'll need to provide documentation of your income and assets for the next hearing. Your Honor, Thomas interjected, that's not relevant to. I'll decide what's relevant, counselor. We provided everything. Tax returns showing my salary at the investment firm. Documentation of Meridian Capital Holdings structure and assets. Redacted to protect confidentiality provisions with other investors. but sufficient to show substantial legitimate income. It should have ended the case. Instead, it made things worse. At the next hearing, Marcus's attorney went on the attack. Your Honor, Ms. Chin now claims to own a multi-million-dollar investment company. This raises serious questions. Where did the capital come from? How did someone working a middle management job suddenly have millions to invest? Thomas stood. Your Honor, my client built her company over 15 years through careful investing in. It doesn't add up, Marcus's attorney interrupted. The only explanation is that she took money from her father and used it to start this so-called investment firm. This is exactly the embezzlement we alleged. I watched Marcus nod gravely, playing the concerned brother protecting his father's legacy. The judge scheduled a full evidentiary hearing. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Over the next 2 months, they subpoenaed everything. Every bank record, every investment, every property acquisition. My entire financial life laid bare because Marcus wanted to fabricate a debt that never existed. Thomas was furious. This is harassment. They're using the court system to conduct a fishing expedition. But we complied. We had nothing to hide. The night before the hearing, I sat in my condo reviewing the timeline of Chin Development Group's projects. The Schaumburg deal in 2018. The Aurora office complex in 2020. The Joliet Retail Center in 2022. $5.4 million in capital that had saved Marcus's projects, built his reputation, made him the success he was so proud of. And tomorrow he'd stand in court and call me a thief. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Meridian Capital Holdings fund manager. Short. Professional. To the point. Then I saved it as a draft and went to bed. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, fluorescent lights, 10 rows of benches that were mostly empty except for Jennifer, Marcus's junior partner Kyle, and a paralegal from Thomas's firm. Marcus took the stand first. His attorney walked him through his prepared testimony. Successful businessman. Devoted son. Concerned brother who'd watched me live beyond my means for years. And you believe your father gave your sister money? The attorney asked. I know he did, Marcus said. Emma was always Dad's soft spot. She'd ask for money and he'd give it to her. $20,000 here, $50,000 there. It added up over the years. Do you have documentation? Dad wasn't good about paperwork. But Mom remembers. And the math doesn't lie. Look at Emma's lifestyle versus her income. The money came from somewhere. Thomas cross-examined. Mr. Chin, do you have a single document showing your father loaned your sister money? Dad did everything on handshake deals. So that's a no? I have Mom's testimony. Your mother, who has been diagnosed with moderate dementia? Marcus's face hardened. My mother's memory of the past is excellent. Does your mother remember what she had for breakfast this morning? Objection. Marcus's attorney stood. Relevance. Sustained, Judge Reeves said. Mr. Wu, move on. Thomas pivoted. Mr. Chin, are you aware of Meridian Capital Holdings? Marcus blinked. No. You've never heard of that company? No. Your firm, Chin Development Group, has never worked with Meridian Capital Holdings? A long pause. I'd have to check our investor records. Thomas smiled. Let me help refresh your memory. 2018 Schaumburg mixed-use project. Ring a bell. Marcus's face went pale. What about it? Who was your equity investor after your lead pulled out? Another pause. Kyle, the junior partner, was staring at his phone with a confused expression. I'd have to check, Marcus said. Your Honor, I'd like to introduce Exhibit 12. Investment agreement between Chin Development Group and Meridian Capital Holdings, dated April 2018. $3.2 million equity position. The document was passed to the judge. Marcus's attorney grabbed a copy. Mr. Chin, Thomas continued, did you know your sister owns Meridian Capital Holdings? The courtroom went silent. Marcus stared at me. Then at the document. Then back at me. That's not possible. I assure you it's very possible. Let me introduce Exhibits 13 and 14. 2 additional investments from Meridian Capital Holdings in your firm's projects. 2020 and 2022. Total capital deployed, $5.4 million. Jennifer gasped audibly. Thomas turned to the judge. Your Honor, the plaintiff is suing his own largest investor. The irony would be amusing if it weren't so wasteful of this court's time. Miss Chin didn't steal from her father. She built a legitimate business that has, ironically, funded much of her brother's success. Marcus's attorney was flipping through documents frantically. Your Honor, we need time to review. I think we've seen enough, Judge Reeves said. He looked at Marcus with open disgust. Mr. Chin, you've dragged your sister through months of litigation, made serious allegations about her character, demanded access to her private financial records. And it turns out she's been bankrolling your business? I didn't know, Marcus said weakly. That's your problem, the judge snapped. Case dismissed. Mr. Chin, you'll pay your sister's legal fees. All of them. And I'm considering sanctions for bringing a frivolous lawsuit. Marcus stood. Your Honor, We're done here. That's when I did it. I pulled out my phone, opened my email, found the draft I'd written the night before. To David Reynolds, Fund Manager, Meridian Capital Holdings. Subject: Chin Development Group, immediate action required. Message: David, effective immediately, withdraw all capital from Chin Development Group. Initiate standard exit procedures per our operating agreement. Cease all future investment discussions with CDG. Timeline: execute within 24 hours. Regards, Emma Chin. I looked at Marcus, made sure he was watching. Then I pressed send. Marcus's face shifted from confusion to understanding to horror in about 3 seconds. His phone buzzed. Then Jennifer's. Then Kyle's phone started ringing. Kyle answered, his face going pale. Marcus, we need to talk. Right now. We were still in the courtroom when Kyle rushed over to Marcus, phone pressed to his ear. Marcus, I'm on with First National. They're asking about Meridian Capital Holdings. They want to know if it's true they're withdrawing. Jennifer grabbed Marcus's arm. What does that mean? I gathered my things calmly. Thomas was packing his briefcase, allowing himself a small smile. Marcus turned to me. Emma, wait. We need to talk. No, I said. We really don't. You can't pull out of our projects. We have contracts, commitments. Read your investor agreements, I said. Standard exit provisions. 90-day liquidation timeline with 30-day notice. I'm invoking them now. 90 days. Kyle's voice cracked. Marcus, the Downers Grove project closes in 6 weeks. If we lose $5.4 million in equity, then you'll need to find replacement capital, I said. I'm sure it won't be a problem. You're very successful after all. Marcus followed me into the hallway. Emma, please. I made a mistake. I didn't know. If I had known. You'd have what? Treated me differently? That's actually worse, Marcus. Jennifer appeared at his shoulder. We can fix this. We can drop the lawsuit. The judge already dismissed it. We'll apologize publicly. You'll find new investors, I said. Just like you did before I came along. Good luck. I walked to the elevator. Pressed the button. Marcus's voice behind me. I'm your brother. I turned. Really looked at him. The golden child. The success story. The man who'd built his reputation partially on my anonymous capital while telling everyone I was a failure. You were never my brother, Marcus. You were someone who shared DNA and a childhood home. A brother would have been happy for my success. A brother wouldn't have sued me for money I never took. A brother wouldn't have stood in court and called me a thief. The elevator doors opened. You built your image on the foundation I provided, then kicked away the foundation and acted surprised when I pulled my support. That's not family. That's exploitation. I stepped into the elevator. Emma, wait. The doors closed. My phone buzzed immediately. David Reynolds, my fund manager. David, notice sent to CDG. They're requesting emergency meeting. Recommend. Me, no meetings. Execute standard procedures. Professional courtesy only. David, understood. For context, their CFO just called. Apparently they have $47 million in projects that we're counting on our continued partnership. This will significantly impact their operations. Me, not our concern. Exit cleanly. David, done. I drove to my office. Meridian Capital Holdings' actual office, the one Marcus never knew existed. Small suite in a professional building. Nothing flashy. My assistant Rachel looked up when I entered. How'd it go? Case dismissed. Also, send notice to all our contacts that we're no longer accepting co-investment opportunities with Chin Development Group. Rachel's eyes widened. All of them? That's... Emma, that's going to send a signal to the market. Good. Send it. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 17 missed calls from Marcus, 11 from Jennifer, and 6 from various people at Chin Development Group. I blocked all of them. The industry grapevine moved fast. Within 48 hours, everyone in Chicago commercial real estate knew that Meridian Capital Holdings, a respected institutional investor, had pulled all capital from Chin Development Group and blacklisted them from future deals. Nobody knew exactly why. But in commercial real estate, perception is everything. If a respected investor exits and blacklists you, other investors assume there's a reason. Maybe financial irregularities. Maybe competence issues. Maybe ethical problems. Within a week, 2 other investors requested early exit from CDG projects. Within 2 weeks, First National Bank called their line of credit under a material adverse change clause. The Downers Grove project collapsed. Without Meridian's $2.1 million equity position and with other investors fleeing, they couldn't close. Chin Development Group lost their $400,000 earnest money deposit. The Aurora office complex went into technical default when they couldn't make a balloon payment. They were forced to sell at a significant loss. Marcus tried to control the narrative. He gave an interview to Crane's Chicago Business claiming they were restructuring for strategic reasons, and that Meridian Capital Holdings had decided to focus on different markets. Nobody believed it. Commercial real estate is a small world. Word got out about the lawsuit, about what Marcus had said in court, about the irony of him suing his own largest investor. His reputation, built over 15 years, disintegrated in less than a month. Jennifer filed for divorce in July. Her family's money, it turned out, had been propping up more of Marcus's operations than anyone realized. When she pulled out, it accelerated the collapse. By September, Chin Development Group was in bankruptcy proceedings. Marcus called one last time. I almost didn't answer. But curiosity won. What do you want? I'm losing everything. His voice was hollow. The company, my marriage, my house. Everything. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you, though? I thought about that. Actually, yes. I'm sorry you built your entire identity on being better than me. I'm sorry you needed me to be a failure so you could feel successful. I'm sorry you couldn't just let me exist without turning it into a competition I never entered. I didn't know. That's the problem, Marcus. You didn't want to know. You never asked about my life. You assumed. And your assumptions made you feel superior, so you protected them. Silence. I didn't pull my money to destroy you, I continued. I pulled it because you stood in court and called me a thief. You weaponized the legal system against me based on pure fiction. That's not something I can invest alongside. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to believe I was stealing from Dad rather than believe I might have built something legitimate. You chose your own narrative over reality. That's not a mistake. That's character. So that's it. We're done. We've been done for a long time, Marcus. You just didn't realize it because I kept quietly investing in your projects and never asked you to see me differently. I'm just done pretending. I hung up. 6 months later, I was in my office when Rachel brought in a copy of Crane's Chicago Business. You should see this. The headline, The Invisible Empire, How Meridian Capital Holdings Became Chicago's Most Influential Real Estate Investor. The article detailed Meridian's portfolio, now $63 million across 12 states, and its reputation for patient capital, conservative leverage, and strong returns. There was a photo of me at a closing, professional but unremarkable. The article mentioned Chin Development Group in passing, one of the few firms Meridian has publicly blacklisted, for reasons the company declined to discuss. My phone rang. Emma, I saw the article. I don't understand. You own an investment company. For 17 years, Mom. But you never said. You never asked. A long pause. Marcus is very upset. I'm sure he is. He's your brother. He sued me for money I never took. He called me a thief in court. He spent years treating me like a failure while I was literally funding his success. What exactly makes him my brother? Family is family. No, Mom. Family is people who show up for each other. Who support each other. who don't weaponize their relationships when it serves them. Marcus was a relative. That's different. She hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't call back. Today, Meridian Capital Holdings manages $78 million in assets. We're selective about our investments, conservative with leverage, and we never invest in businesses run by people who mistake confidence for competence. I still live in the same condo. Still drive a sensible car. Still dress in Nordstrom Rack clothes. The difference is that now I know the truth Marcus spent 17 years refusing to see. You don't need anyone's validation to be successful. You just need to do the work, make good decisions, and build something real. The power reversal wasn't the moment in court when everyone learned I'd been funding Marcus's success. The real reversal happened years earlier when I stopped caring if Marcus ever saw me clearly. Because the people who matter, my investors, my partners, my team, they saw me just fine. And that was always enough.